I'm down at the King Center right now. Try to have a conversation with someone, but no, they don't want to hear the other side. If you think differently than they do, then you're a pariah. The only thing these folks want to do is take away guns from American citizens. That's all they want to do. They want to take everybody's gun. That's what it's all about, taking your guns away. Here come the protesters. If you took, I wonder what some of these folks would do when somebody breaks into their home. Dial 911? What if there are nobody to answer that 911 call? And those folks don't have a weapon in their house to protect themselves or their loved ones. But they don't want anybody else to have weapons. And the police may not be available to answer your phone call. So keep thinking we don't need weapons to protect yourself and your home and your loved ones.
Every new day, what is today's truth? What is today's moral action? Oh, now we need to use 2 masks. Okay, well, let me get on the horse and I'll make sure I am always wearing 2 masks and telling everybody else I need to too. Oh, now we have to all get vaccines? Okay, well, let's do that now. Right? They are led by whatever the truth of the crowd is. They're not using their brains for their own independent thought. They're using their brains to rationalize the truth that the crowd gives them. And that's the scary part, because in this period, it hasn't been IQ or education or any kind of soft skill intelligence that has determined whether people have been sucked up into the crowd. And in fact, the people who are most educated and most intelligent, and some of the tops of our best institutions, they have such big brains that they can rationalize almost anything with a really good story, right? And that has been part of the problem as well. There have been, ridiculous rationalizations of lockdowns and everything else. And the people who actually, are making those rationalizations are the product of our best universities. These are really, really smart people. You'd like to be able to trust them, but it's not about.
Which excludes food and energy, jumped 0.6% month over month. As for gas prices, 60 cents higher than last month, nearly $2 more than a year ago.
The Saudis raised their prices for oil they're selling to Asia. That tells me I don't really see relief in the near term.
President Biden today continuing to push the same messaging that we've heard all year, pinning blame on Putin and U.S. oil companies.
You talk about how they have 9,000 permits to drill. They're not drilling. I'm doing everything in my power to blunt Putin's price hike.
But experts tell NTD the White House can do more to lower the price at the pump.
At these prices, I think it's fair to say oil companies are trying to produce. It makes business sense. They also are trying to produce natural gas. But you have to get it to market. And so the administration has to be transparent about whether they're also approving permits and licenses for pipelines.
So, Melina, how is the Federal Reserve expected to respond to this record high inflation?
Steve, the Federal Reserve is expected to raise interest rates by at least 50 basis points this month and next month. Now, some economists are predicting and expecting the Fed to raise interest rates by as much as 0.75%. Now, what appears to be certain here is that the Fed will continue to raise these interest rates, but what's uncertain is whether or not we've seen the peak of inflation.
And is currently the Dean of Liberty University's Business School. We're happy to have him on to discuss. Dr. David Brat, thank you so much for joining us on the Capitol Report.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
David, the CPI was just released, jumping to 8.6%. This is the highest since 1981. How do you see the consumer price index here affecting the overall economy?
Yeah, well, so the CPI is the measure of inflation. Inflation is not when oil prices go up or formula goes up. It's when the overall price index for the entire country goes up. And so obviously it's devastating, right? It's a hidden stealth tax. If it's going up by about 10%, you're getting a 10% hit there on your spending. And then in addition to that, that's causing the stock market all sorts of grief. And so we're almost in bear market territory there. The market's down about 20% from its highs. And then going back to Milton Friedman, he won the Nobel Prize for inflation and his monetary theory way back in the 60s before the politics went bananas. And he said correctly, inflation is always and everywhere a monetary phenomenon. And so just a couple months ago, the Fed was still printing 24% increases in money supply. Then it went down to 12. But it's not down to 12. It's still 12% increasing the money supply. And so they should be increasing the money supply by the amount of GDP growth you have, which is only about 2%. So they've been printing way too much money. So then you get the inflation. And then Friedman said it's very hard to detect how long the lag is. That will determine how long we're going to live with this beast. But he said anywhere from 6 months to a year and a half. And so this thing is not going away anytime soon. And it's the number one issue in the polls that is giving many middle-income folks some just terrible life choices at the dinner table between food, medicine. You've read all the stories, right? Filling up the gas tank to go to work. So it's devastating.
David, if you could advise the president, what would you suggest as to how to turn this thing around?
Yeah, well, my advice is always don't put us in the ditch in the first place. And so he just reappointed a Fed chair who put us in the ditch. So, you got to scratch your head at that. So my counsel to him is way too late in the game. But, the Taylor rule, John Taylor, who's the greatest monetary guy now out at Stanford, he took over from Friedman, says the interest rate, the Fed funds rate should be at about 7 or 8%, right? So then your car loans are 10%, your mortgage is even higher if you really want to slow this thing down. So they got to do more than this half-point increase. They're going to have to do a couple full percentage point increases in the interest rate. You first have to get rid of inflation because you're messing with the entire price system of the country. We are rich for the last
Standpoint, when you look at the price of diesel, for example,
when it's swinging so violently from one day to the next, it's impossible to plan long term, heck, even run a business for a week or so. And so we have a real challenge in addressing this. It also doesn't help that we have the Speaker of the House who is saying that she will not bring our domestic energy independence bill to the floor. In fact, she's rejected it 6 times. Now, that's the problem. That the left wants nothing to do with domestic production of energy. They don't believe in, above all, energy portfolio. They don't believe in nuclear. They don't believe in LNG. They don't believe in fossil fuels. But we are an energy economy. And if we are to get our ship righted, we need to tap into the resources that we have here in abundance. And the thing that I continually go back to is everyone wants to be an above all, but unless it is driven by the free markets, it's not going to be viable. And this push that the administration is making towards electric vehicles, this is stressing the grid, and we're already seeing reports coming out of brownouts and blackouts happening across the country, and they'll continue to go on throughout the summer. This is unacceptable. We have the means to produce enough energy for our economy and then some. We need to get government out of the way. Congress can't act. It's Nancy Pelosi who refuses to.
Congresswoman Kat Cammack, thank you.
Bureau of Investigation, a number of agencies within the Department of Justice, and of course our partners in Mexico.
In May, the Department of Homeland Security began implementing a new process meant to expedite asylum claim processing. And $1 million to assist refugees and, quote, vulnerable migrants across the hemisphere, including humanitarian aid for Venezuelans who fled to 17 different countries. The White House has also dedicated $25 million to a global organization at the World Bank. This money is supposed to help Latin American countries like Ecuador and Costa Rica to support their programs for displaced migrants. The countries have also agreed on a sting operation to disrupt human smuggling networks across the hemisphere. Here's the Secretary of Homeland Security today explaining the scope of the operation.
Part 1 of our 2-part series, COVID-19, A Reckoning. COVID-19 changed us. The world today is not the one we left in December 2019. We'll look back upon this time as before COVID and after. But it wasn't the disease itself that did it. It's how we responded to it. And the scope of what's new reaches so many facets of society. How we view liberty and risk. How we show love for children and care for each other. The confidence we have in our institutions. And the importance we give to open debate, fairness, and dignity. So what happens next? We're at a turning point, and the direction we chart for the future depends on how we collectively judge and learn from the past 2 years. The people I spoke with for this report are already thinking about it, and they're some of the same people who saw very early on that the sand was shifting beneath our feet. In part 1, we focus on the state of the nation in the pandemic's wake. I met Jeffrey Tucker at the inaugural conference of his new venture, the Brownstone Institute, in November 2021. Jeffrey is an economist, social philosopher, and prolific writer, including of 10 books and now a daily column for the Epoch Times. The Brownstone was born out of Jeffrey's alarm at how ready officials and the American public were to trade in liberty and basic rights to fight one deadly pathogen.
It's hard to remember, isn't it? All the way back before times. Before my COVID book was a book called "The Market Loves You," and it's a hymn, like a serenade to technology and the modern world. Everything was perfect. Everything was getting better. There's progress all around us. As far as I was concerned, the big failing was that people were too pessimistic and not appreciative enough of the glories of globalism and technological advance. Now, looking back at it, that seems like the book, that you write, celebrating the beauty of world peace in 1911, something like that. I didn't know what was coming. Maybe I should have anticipated that. I had gotten carried away with my optimism, perhaps. I'm not entirely sure what happened. Looking back at it, I feel like I was, like a Victorian age, liberal of the 1890s, just failing to understand the coming storm. I didn't understand the coming storm, and I wasn't there for it. I wasn't psychologically prepared for it. On March 12th was the 2020 when I saw the darkness. I felt psychologically the darkness arriving, and I woke up the next day with that sense of surely yesterday was a dream or a nightmare. It didn't really happen, but it did happen, and it kept getting worse.
Selfish, a threat to everyone else, irresponsible, careless, toxic, and dangerous. And vaccinated people were seen as superior, altruistic, unselfish, taking one for the team.
This idea that you need to drive as many eyeballs or as many clicks to this situation, and COVID created the perfect scenario. This thing drove headlines like nothing before.
And there's proof to back Jordan up. A National Bureau of Economic Research report in November 2020 found that 91% of stories across major media outlets in the U.S. were negative, compared to just 54% in other countries. And even when the developments were positive, like schools reopening or cases dropping, the spin was negative. Meanwhile, social media platforms squeezed the town square into a tighter and tighter corner, guarded by censors and fact-checkers. Off-narrative messages, whether based in fact or not, got punished, creating strong incentives for self-censorship. Reporter Scott Moorfield experienced all of it.
If you start getting things banned, if you start being labeled as purveyors of misinformation, then you're going to be really scared about what you publish. I experienced that a lot too. I would pitch a story, it would get turned down for no other reason than that social media would not, they don't want to take the risk of publishing it on social media. So I understand, I totally get it. I wasn't mad about it, it's frustrating. But this is a situation where social media and the big tech oligarchs basically collude with government and determine what the public gets to see. For instance, a story about when Florida parents sent several face masks for an analysis to a lab, and they came back with all kinds of nasty. The story went viral. They fact-checked that on Facebook and basically took it down for really no logical reason. None. Nobody was saying in the story that this proves that all face masks have these things. So it's just, here's the fact. They sent these masks down, they analyzed them, and they found E. coli, all these crazy things on the masks. Okay, that's it. That story was crushed by social media. And then after that, we had to tighten up a lot. No choice, because another story like that and Facebook could shut the site down, shut the page down, and lose a huge percentage of site traffic. So that was scary.
So what's so interesting about that is it's not even
Church.
If it should end in fire, then we should all burn together. Watch the flames climb high into the night.
Our main goal is souls, to reach souls. And we all came to an agreement that, we weren't going to let the music and, all the different drama that goes on with creating music and trying to put it together and a whole band coming together. We weren't going to let that make us lose focus of what our real purpose was, is souls. The word ecclesia, it's actually a Greek word. It means empowered and sent. We use the word church now. In Jesus' time, they would have said ecclesia, the empowered and sent ones. So
that's my thesis. Dissect the Bible like a puzzle. Every piece leads us to Jesus. And when he says this, he means it. Love God and love your brother. You are his keeper. Lay down your life for one another. When we don't seek his face, all we see is the struggle. Then we buckle to our sin, and everything crumbles. I'm humble, but this country's turned their back on God now. Times are getting harder. Land of the freeze, looking like Sodom and Gomorrah.
The modern day church.
I die to my flesh. This is his last breath. I put it to death. So Jesus, just manifest what's left. The victory's in you, and you don't won the contest. And I'm free, free to be me, free from the enemy. So flee all the sin in me. For infinity, flee all the sin in me. For infinity, and it feels good to be free. So free, free to be me, free to be me.
Hey, inflation, how you doing there, buddy? You hanging in there? Yeah, ain't got no other choice, do you?